Hello and welcome to The Appetite, a podcast brought to you by Opal Food and Body Wisdom, an eating disorder treatment center in Seattle, Washington. It is a podcast about all things food, body, movement, and mental health. I'm Bazzi, co-founder, clinical director, and the director of the exercise and sport program at Opal, as well as your host for today. On today's episode, I'll be having a discussion with Heather Caplan, an anti-diet, weight-inclusive dietitian who has worked with athletes for over 15 years. Heather is also the co-founder of the Lane 9 Project, which features a podcast, a weekly Substack, and a community of providers who are all working towards reducing relative energy deficiency in sport, or RED-S. As you can imagine, there's a lot of overlap between Heather's professional work in Opal, and there's a lot of overlap between Heather and I as providers, as we've known each other for years and have had different experiences to work together. And what makes this conversation exciting to me is it allows us to do a deeper dive on a topic that we both really care about, which is, dun, 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 when I asked Heather what is coming up in her clinical practice with her athletes, she shared that she gets a lot of questions about whether it's okay to keep running or training for sport when someone has awareness that they aren't fueling enough. And that might be, a sign from not getting their period or other signs. And it's interesting. I was like, gosh, yes, let's dive into this topic because I'm not surprised this comes up frequently. And I can't wait to hear Heather's thoughts around how she approaches this. So we're going to get started. Welcome, Heather.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Yes, me too. Okay, I'm going to set this up and then I will stop talking. But we're going to enter into this. I consider this a gray area, and I love talking about gray areas. So I want to start the conversation by talking about the systemic nature of this, the systemic framework. And then we can talk a little bit more about then how are you working, individually with your athletes around this. And I want to start, I read this article during National Eating Disorder Awareness Week that I thought was fantastic. I'm going to link the full article in the show notes for those that are interested, but I'm going to read just an excerpt from this article to get us going because I thought it was really apt for this conversation. Okay. Female athletes don't learn to stay quiet by chance. Silence is taught, reinforced, and rewarded. From early adolescence, discomfort is framed as something to push through rather than interrogate. Pain becomes expected. Fatigue is reframed as dedication. Questions about missed periods, low energy, or recurring injuries are risky, not because they're unreasonable, but because they can be read as weakness. I remember losing my period as a junior and mentioning it to my coach. The response wasn't concern, it was approval. It was taken as a sign that I was finally working hard enough, that this was simply what being a serious athlete looked like. A clear physiological warning sign was reframed as success, and there was nothing left to question. In competitive environments, particularly universities, athletes learn quickly what honesty costs. Selection feels fragile, credibility feels conditional. There's a constant calculation running underneath everything. Is this worth saying if it changes how I'm seen? Over time, that calculation becomes automatic. Okay, we're going in with a bang. And this author is framing some of that systemic challenge that all of us athletes go through, all genders, but we're going to be probably talking a little bit more about female athletes, female-bodied athletes. So I would love for just to start with hearing your kind of reflection or response around kind of the systems lens of this and how that relates to messaging around periods, training, et cetera.
Yeah. I mean, the first thing I thought when I read this was, culturally, a lot of us are conditioned to stay quiet about our period, whether you're an athlete or not. If you are a person who menstruates, in a lot of situations, and I will speak from a United States lens, like growing up, it did not feel like a thing to talk about, except with maybe your closest friends. That was my experience. And I think what we see in sport is that a lot of cultural and systemic norms trickle down to sports or are reflected in sports, right? And it makes sense to me, as frustrating and sometimes enraging as it is, that what we know about period health and women's health and menstrual health societally and culturally and systemically is that it is pushed off to the side and kept quiet and considered not important in a lot of circles. I do think that's changing, and we're seeing kind of a wave of awareness and conversations and research and all of those things. But for a lot of us, growing up in sport and growing up with a period meant like you keep it quiet and don't make it anybody else's problem. And that is like culturally, the way that I'm socially conditioned as a woman is also like true for many things in my experience, right? So when we think about periods and we think about sports, it feels unsurprising, unfortunately, that there are a lot of cultures and teams where it feels like just keep that to yourself. And it feels unsurprising that in a pretty male-dominated coaching environment, the fewer periods to deal with, the better. So, sure, let's chalk it up to being quote unquote fit. Like, did anyone ever really believe that? I don't know. Or was it a convenient way to coach when it meant that you don't have to worry about your athletes being on their periods? I don't know. I don't have the answer to that. I can just speculate. But I feel like, again, what we see culturally, politically, and socially is also what we often see reflected in sports, for better or worse, right? And for an athlete to feel like if I keep my struggles quiet, that makes me a better athlete. It makes me more dedicated. It makes me stronger. It makes me a better part of the team because I'm not weighing anybody down. We see that reflected in people who are socially conditioned as women. So, of course, that happens in sport.
And I'm assuming that is what you're seeing reflected in your clinical practice with the athletes you're working with.
Oh, yeah. It's really like still in 2026,
Right.
intake assessment with a new client. And I'll say, okay, let's talk a little bit about your period. And it's like, oh, oh, do we have to do that? It's like still a little bit of discomfort or a lot of discomfort, depending on the person. And I feel so excited when I have someone who's like, oh, yeah, I'll tell you all about my period. I'm like, please do. I love it.
Yeah, I thought, it's interesting when in this quote, when she talks about the response of her coach too. And, that tracks to my athlete experience as a collegiate athlete over 20 years ago. It's just like,
Yeah.
wow, how frequent does this story still remain despite the increase and the progression of science and information and dissemination of all this information? Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I played soccer in high school and that was 20 years ago, and it would have never occurred to me to talk to my coach about my period.
Yeah.
Like, never, never, never. And then fast forward when we started Lane 9, it was 2017. So probably in 2018, I gave a presentation to a high school team in the DC area. And when we started talking about periods, the coach visibly shifted in his body, like, oh, I don't know if I should be here. And I'm like, if you can't talk about periods to athletes on your women's team or your girls' team, don't be coaching them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's like, this is part of their experience. It's part of their health. It is important. And if you can't get comfortable talking about it, that is a you problem and you can work on that, but don't give that problem to them.
Yes. That's a perfect demonstration of a system response, right? That is a system problem. That's not the athlete's problem.
Right.
Of this lack of discomfort as a culture on the team to talk about periods. It's so funny because I had a small stint of coaching last fall with a high school girls team and brought in my little period presentation and we did a game of true and false with all these kind of facts about menstruation. And it was I just had so much fun with it because not only are we talking about it and using the words, but it really, highlights what kids know and what they don't know. And there's a lot they don't know. So, we used the information from Stanford Faster's program with all their amazing infographics and just easy to digest information. I can link that in the show notes as well. But it was just like a
Yeah.
fun and easy way to just like, let's get going. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it.
Yeah, and like, as an athlete many years ago, I do feel like I remember talking to my teammates about it because we were all going through something similar. But if we had like sat down with our coaches and someone had brought in like tampons and pads, I think all of us would have been like, "Oh God, what are we doing?"
Yeah.
You know? But I would love to do that
Yes.
now.
It's called
Like,
the period pack. And
yeah,
you put in the tampons, you put in the pads, you put in the little heat, those little heat
little
things,
heat
that
pads.
heat
Yeah.
pads. Yeah.
Yeah.
My gosh.
I
Wouldn't
know.
that be amazing if that was the norm, right? The norm. Do you feel like there's anything that this excerpt like misses, or do you feel like this is sort of, really kind of capturing what you're seeing in your
I
practice?
mean, it's capturing, I think, what a lot of people have experienced. I think again, it does feel like in the work that I do and the teams that I talk to, I certainly have a little bit of a bias because anyone who's reaching out to us wants to do differently, right? They want to be having these conversations with their teams. But we talk to so many athletes for our podcast and for essays that have been written for Lane 9, where this is exactly the experience they had. And I think, what's missing in so many of these higher level programs, especially, I mean, I know that a lot of high schools are working with really limited resources and coaches are hardly getting paid, if getting paid at all, and they're putting in so much time. And, athletic directors, same thing, like they're in charge of a lot. So I get that. But I think at the higher levels, collegiate programs, sub-elite teams, professional teams, like we're still hearing like this is not something I feel like I can talk about or that I have the resources to like on our team that there are resources put into having these conversations. It just feels like it is still dismissed. And that's where I just really feel like, we are seeing some change, but there's just so much that needs to happen for athletes to feel more comfortable bringing up something, but also feeling like to the point of this essay, like if you bring that up, you're not penalized as an athlete, you know?
Right.
And I don't know where to start with that. It feels like the pressure that has been created around higher level sports in our country is creating so many health issues, mental health issues, and physical health issues for athletes because the attitude is very short-term success over long-term health. Like in a collegiate program, we have these for you we have you for these 4 years. Let's like see what we can do. And that's not, there's not total harm that comes from that. I understand that as a coach, like wanting an athlete to have a great experience, but let's maybe redefine what that means,
Right.
and expand having a great experience to also like learning how to take care of yourself as an athlete so that you can have these 4 years, but you can also have your sport after these 4 years if you want to, you know?
And you and I know these are not mutually exclusive. To take
Right,
care of your physical health and to take care of your mental health doesn't mean that you're not like that will and can connect to good sport performance,
right,
right?
right.
So, whew, yeah. We both care a lot about this one.
Yeah.
Okay. So maybe we see some of the same trends that we both saw when we were in college. And we both know that, especially within like the providers that we both collaborate with and with, I think we're seeing it more with some coaches that there is this progression in this field, right? That we are seeing more information, more science, more research being devoted to low energy availability, relative energy deficiency in sport. I know the Lane 9 clinicians are rarely reflective in all of this increase and this wonderful change.
Yeah.
Are you seeing any of that translating into your patient population?
So what I feel like I'm seeing is what I shared with you. Like there is a lot more awareness that doesn't always translate to behavioral change,
Yes.
right? And that's true for coaches who are more aware of this. It is true for athletes who are more aware of this. It feels like, okay, we know a lot more. And I always think of this as like that is the seed planted, But for a seed that is planted to turn into a plant, it takes some time,
Mhm.
It takes some time. So what I have seen over almost 10 years of working in this space through Lane 9 is we have I think, a really vast increase in the conversation. Like we see so many more people from the pros down to the high school athletes and coaches and support people and parents and clinicians talking about period health and adequate fueling and REDs. And there are, I think, a lot more people in the sports space who know what I mean when I say REDs. Whereas 10 years ago, it was like, what?
Mhm.
Is
It
that an
was.
acronym? What are you saying? So I do think the awareness is increasing, but that doesn't always translate to it's not a parallel line of like behaviors changing.
Mhm.
That takes a lot of time.
Yes. And you spoke to one of the barriers. Let's talk about that. That
Yeah.
translation gap. So we know something and what is the challenge from taking that knowledge into practice. And you named one of them of maybe discomfort, awkwardness,
Mhm.
right, of talking about it, so working with it, and then also the coach's response, the threat, or the potential threat,
Yeah.
potentially seeing it as weakness, as this excerpt reflected. What are other things that you observe in your practice of the challenges of that gap?
Yeah. I mean, I think I don't work one-on-one with coaches most of the time, but I think just to speak to that piece a little bit, I think part of it is like they can be aware, but they may not know what to do, right? So maybe it's like, this is just the way I've always coached, and we haven't talked about periods. And it is just that behavioral change of like building it into your system, into your structure, into the rhythm of your season. So having some awareness that like even like a little tiny bit of change will go a long way for the athletes that you're working with. From an athlete perspective, which is more where my work lies, I think mostly what I see is an experience of grief around something that they're holding on to that they are afraid to let go of. So if we're pulling from the example of the excerpt, like this athlete is scared that if something changes, they won't be as good at their sport. They might lose their spot on the team. They might lose a season without thinking long term to what they will gain, right? And that's hard to do. What I've heard so many times over the years, as I primarily work in the period recovery space, so I'm working with somebody who has awareness that they are not getting a period, and that is a problem. But what do we do next, right?
Yes.
There is so much fear around the unknown. So the current space they're in is a known space. And even if they are aware that what they're experiencing is not healthy for their body and what they're doing is not healthy for their body, it's the known factor. And the unknown is, how much will my body change? How much will I really have to be eating? Will I be able to train for something again? Will I be able to do my sport in the same way in the future? And I can't answer those questions with certainty, right? We can speculate a little bit for each person, but I can't guarantee any outcome other than I'm pretty good at helping you get your period back. I can do that.
Mm.
I can help you fuel adequately to get your period back. But there are unknowns. And so there's this grief because the space between what is known and what is unknown feels scary, and they don't really know what they might be giving up to get from point A to point B. So there's bargaining, there's denial, there's anger. I see all the stages, and it makes sense. You are losing kind of like this version of yourself. And even if what might be on the other side of this process is a healthier body who can participate in sport, if that's important to you for a long time, the gap between point A and point B is scary.
Yes. And when you're sharing that, it's reminding me of a lot that we talk about on this podcast about over-controlled temperament and
Yeah.
how that fear of the unknown that we see a lot with our clients as well is it's all the fear is around the threat versus the possibility, the surprise of something better.
Right.
And it's like because the known is what the loss is the thing that's highlighted versus the possibility of, wow, I could actually maybe even be in a much better state of mind and perform well and all of the things, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
it's so skewed towards the scary part when we're looking at
yeah.
the possibilities of what the outcome will be.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. One thing I hear really often, and I was going here and then I forgot to finish my thought, was, what if I lose all my fitness?
Yeah.
And I'm like, what if you break like 3 bones just from training for this race?
Right.
Like your fitness will be gone either way
Yeah.
temporarily. Like this over-controlled temperament is thinking like if I keep doing these things that are known and that I have been doing, I can control the outcome.
Mm-hmm.
And this is from somebody who maybe has not yet had a bone stress injury or yet had a sport pausing or sport ending injury. So there is still this feeling that like what I'm doing is okay because I haven't seen it negatively impact my body yet. Except for the whole period piece,
Yeah.
which like
Right.
which again like goes back to this experience that like for so many of us what you learn about your period is so limited and you don't fully understand it until one, you maybe you have to because you are kind of finding yourself in this situation where like I better start understanding this a lot better or like these things are just going to keep happening. I'm going to keep having these health issues or mental health issues or bone stress injuries or whatever the case may be. And I just, like if we had an education system, a health education system, a cultural experience where like these things were just part of what we learned about our bodies, it would change so much.
Right. Yeah. The focus, the seeing that importance. Like I remember, for raising 2 daughters that are runners, it was of utmost importance to say their body needs to be well first before the
Hmm.
running. And so as
Yes.
they were developing, especially my youngest one developing and went through a huge growth spurt, got her first period. And there was like at that first year, there was sort of some of this, like, is she getting enough fuel to get this regular? Like that
Mhm.
was the focus.
Yeah.
Running was going to come secondary. And that just, I think that mentality is not the typical mentality of parents, coaches of let's get
No.
this baseline and this body well
Yeah.
before everything else, So, and of course, that's
Yeah.
based in my own lived experience and the work I do, but that has felt an essential message to give her. Like, this is of the utmost, this
Yeah.
piece of having a well body. And then running is awesome and so fun. And I want you to have what you want, but
Yeah. I
this
mean,
is most
imagine
important.
if high school coaches said, like, we get a period first, then we train.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So many of the clients I work with who are in high school have not had a period yet
Mm,
at all. And the problem we're up against a lot of times is that they are already so invested in their sport
mm,
that it takes a lot
to get
to
it.
convince them to scale back on sport.
Okay, you need to
Like
tell me more. Yeah.
our
Yeah.
priorities are
Yeah.
out of line, right? Like the sport is more important than the period. And it has to be the other way around for a developing athlete who is going through puberty, trying to get that first menses, and then we work with it, right? Then we know, okay, we've gotten your body to a place developmentally where it is happy and it has started your menstrual cycle, and now we keep it. Now we
Mm-hmm.
maintain it. And we can do that.
Mm-hmm.
But what's a lot harder is to have an athlete who's 16, 17, 18 years old, invested in their high school sport, has had success in their sport, is very scared to lose that and very scared of their body changing because, again, this is a gap between the known and the unknown. And yet there's this huge red flag that they have not had a period yet. And a lot of times these are athletes who either have had a stress fracture already or have one by the time I'm working with them. And that is because, and again, this feels like a very United States cultural thing. Like the way sports are prioritized right now is so scary. I mean, my kids are 8, 5, and 4, and they have friends on travel sport teams.
Hmm.
like
Yeah,
in first grade. It's like,
yeah.
what?
But
And
yes.
some of these kids are doing travel and the rec team,
Yeah.
which I'm glad they're still in the rec program because I think it's important and I want that program to be supported and to have participants. But like the way we treat sports in this country is so wild. And so we have kids who by high school feel like they are professional athletes and
Yes.
they're trying to get into college to participate. I even have some some high schoolers who are not interested in running in college, but are still so serious about their high school sport that it has taken over as top priority over their health.
Mm-hmm.
And that is completely backwards from from where it should be.
Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh. So, yeah, Heather, oh my gosh. So, I was thinking about how we've made this progress right on this education level, but the thing that's gotten worse is what you're speaking to is this early sports specialization, the pressure,
Right.
the money that's come from NIL, the much more competitive entree into these sports. It's getting worse with roster limits in NCAA. And it is, I mean, that is a huge systemic factor in the work that you and I both do.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
there is a real threat of if I want to do this later on, I might put my health beneath this sport performance, and I might have a family that is supporting me putting my health below this sport performance.
Yeah.
It's really,
Yeah.
and it was funny. I just was on a run this past weekend with people in kind of my era. And we all asked each other, like, how do we get into running? And we all were collegiate runners. And it was wild. None of us were high school standouts it wasn't even none of us was our main
Yeah.
sport in high school. None of us. But that wouldn't exist now. We wouldn't have been able to get on like a Division I collegiate team.
Yeah.
So that has really changed from over 20 years ago, right?
Well, so my neighbors, we moved to Ann Arbor 3 years ago, and we have three high schools in Ann Arbor that are all, in my opinion, massive. Like
Mm-hmm.
there's so many students. Where I went to high school, I think I graduated with like 350 in my graduating class, right? So our high school was probably like 1,200 kids or something. And these schools feel like they're double that. I could be wrong. I could have it a little skewed, but they feel huge to me.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, and 20 years ago, when our neighbors' kids were in high school, who are like close to my age, there were only two. So they were very like the classes were huge. And we asked them, they're all runners. One of them has done Boston a few times since we moved here, and they've done all these like hikes, and they're all just like endurance sport people. And so we had asked them a few years ago, what sports did you play in high school when you were in high school here? And they were like, oh, we weren't good enough to play any of the team sports, so we did cross country. And I'm like, well, that's lovely.
Yeah.
I would be so happy if my kids do cross country and I didn't look back and see that I spent $20,000 on them doing travel sports,
Yeah.
like
Ooh,
to each their own. I feel
yes.
like I need to rein in my feelings about it a little bit. But it's like, I think running for a lot of people, it is like the fallback. It's like I did this sport and then it got really competitive or I couldn't do it at this level. So I did running instead. And that's my story with running. I didn't
Mm-hmm.
run in college, but I played soccer through high school. I didn't feel good enough to play in college. So I went to a big school, but then I just started running because it was an option. And I think what happens is a lot of people up to this point, prior to NIL and roster limits, like running was an option. If you wanted to be an athlete, but you didn't feel competitive in some of the team sports, like cross country is welcoming to all, and track and field is welcoming to all, and come on in, which is not to say the sport isn't rife with its own problems,
Right.
right?
Right.
But it's something that you could do maybe without a lot of that pressure. And now what I'm seeing is like actually all sports are just
Pressure cooker.
part
Mm-hmm.
of that process, part of that system. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Let's get a little bit more into your practice because
Sure.
that was just like really interesting to hear of how many people you're working with that haven't even gotten their first period. So,
Yeah.
can you give like me and the listeners like a general understanding of sort of what is represented in your patient practice in terms of what is going on with menstruation?
Yeah. Well,
Because
it's
that's
changed a lot over the years. So when I opened my practice about 10 years ago in DC, And I knew this is what I wanted to focus on. I have lived experience with hypothalamic amenorrhea. I didn't get a period for 6 years, had no idea that it wasn't I had no idea it was a problem.
Mhm.
Nary a clue. I was going to college studying nutrition and dietetics and was in a healthcare major. Don't remember any conversation around period health, hypothalamic amenorrhea, primary or secondary amenorrhea, perimenopause, postmenopause. Like it's just all, in my experience, in my memory, it was all really brushed over. I only learned the term hypothalamic amenorrhea because I worked in a kinesiology lab in college, studied under Nancy Williams in her lab, who still does research on the female athlete triad. And they posted these flyers around campus saying like, are you not getting a period? Take this little tear off and contact our lab. And I was like, okay, I'd like to work in your lab.
Oh.
So, so I
That's
worked in
amazing.
the lab and I learned what hypothalamic amenorrhea meant and what it was and how they were studying like the interventions that were used and all those things. So anyways, fast forward from my college years to 2016, 2017, got into private practice and knew that I wanted to work with active women or active people who were not getting a period to help them get it back. So for many years, my primary client population was women who suddenly were like, I want to get pregnant, but I don't get a period. So how is that going to happen? And a lot of them
Mhm.
had been athletes in high school, in college, were runners, and were like, wait, what's going on? What's happening? So that was the population I worked with for a long time. A few college athletes. I was in the DC area, so there's a few schools in that area. So I did work with a few college athletes. And then in like version 2 of lane 9, we took a little break around the pandemic and we call this V2.
Mhm.
Our Google Drive is like lane 9 V2. In this version of my private practice and kind of this era of my practice, I have gotten involved with more physical therapists and therapists who work with high school athletes and they're referring clients to me. So suddenly I work with high school athletes.
Yeah.
Over the last couple of years, I'm like, oh, I guess I do this now. So this is kind of a new season for me where that's more of what I'm seeing. And I usually, again, I'm often seeing them because they've already seen another provider who is then referring them to a dietitian.
Like
I
another
think
provider, meaning like a therapist, a
a therapist or
doctor.
a physical
Okay.
therapist. I have gotten a few from a physician, a pediatrician here, but primarily physical therapist and or mental health provider, which is telling because I think it shows that there is a lack of knowledge for some parents too, of like, how long do we let this go before we should see somebody? And instead, what happens is there's a forcing agent, a forcing factor, bone stress injury, increased anxiety or symptoms of depression or something like that, where it's like, this is what we're seeing. Oh, by the way, this person hasn't gotten a period yet. Oh, by the way, they're 16, 17, 18 years old and they're in a sport. You might need some nutrition support. That might need to be part of, or it does need to be part of the work that we're doing.
Mhm. Okay. Well, that
Does that
I
answer your
actually, yes,
question?
I love learning that. So okay, so then you're working with these high school athletes. They're coming to you. That's really fascinating, actually, to hear the physical therapy aspect because that is likely then, right? You're somebody that's dealing with an injury,
Right.
and
It's already created a
yes,
different problem.
right.
Yeah.
So injury kind of being the entry point into it. So let's talk now about kind of going back to what we were saying earlier around you can give them the information and how scary it is to make the change. So like let's talk about how you're working with these athletes, what you're finding, where are
Yeah.
you finding when athletes are making the changes to return their period health? Where does the role, going back to that question of like training while doing this, what are you recommending? How are you doing
Yeah.
motivational interviewing? All of the things.
Yeah.
Big
Yeah.
question.
I have found in my work more recently that a lot of the high school athletes are motivated by getting a period. They are seeing their peers have their periods, maybe upperclassmen if they're a freshman or a sophomore, and they feel motivated by that factor. And so even if the body changes feel kind of scary or the potential time away from sport feels scary, the underlying motivation is like, I know my friends are getting their periods, the upperclassmen have their periods, like I want to have my period, which is great. That means they're talking about it with their teammates, right?
Mm-hmm.
I have found that for some of them, the coach influence on fueling is not what I would like it to be. Like, they're going on really long runs and it's not even suggested to bring water. It's like, oh, well, we do 10 miles as a team on Saturday. Okay, what are you bringing on the run? And they're like, what?
Mm.
What do you mean?
Yeah.
One of my high school athletes was like, well, sometimes our coach meets us halfway and has some bottles of water. And I was like, oh, okay, what about Gatorade or
Right.
like,
Right.
like some gummy bears or something.
Mm.
So yeah, I'm seeing that there is a motivation to get their period started. I have seen some people who have had a period but then like didn't get another one. Had their menses but haven't had a period since. So we talk through, of course we start with like what are you eating now and how can we add to that and get you back on. A lot of times their growth has fallen off of their growth curve. So we're looking at growth charts, which are not a perfect tool, but they are a tool. So how can we get you closer to where it looks like your body wanted to be, but we've fallen off the curve, and use that as kind of a guide to what may be a biologically appropriate weight for them. Some of the high schoolers want to know their weight. Some like to know a percentage of like how close they are to a goal weight and what that might mean. And I find that a lot of them, unfortunately, just seem to have kind of had some early, I say unfortunately, it's like this
Early
creates a problem.
success.
They've had some like early success in the sport as a young athlete on a high school team doing really well. And our thought process around sport is often a very linear progression. If I did this now, I should be able to do this and this and this and just climb along a ladder to get better and better and better without there being any human element to how we might actually experience sport, which is an up and down experience, right? And it's tricky with something like track and field or cross country, where we have a literal time measurement of how you do. It is you're ranked on a team, you place in a race, versus something like soccer, or softball, or field hockey, or lacrosse, where you're just part of a team and you're participating in the sport.
Right.
And your individual participation gives to the team, but is not so objectively measurable, right? So, I mean, I'm seeing a lot of high school athletes who are overtraining. They're training outside of their team hours. They're going to the gym on the weekends. They're not taking rest days. They are eating a lot of protein and not a lot of carbohydrates. And they are motivated by getting their period back, but it's complicated. There are a lot of factors for them.
Okay. And maybe speak to like the patients that are like kind of delineating between the person who is low energy availability and the person who has more mental health aspect to it, the more like you're starting to see more of an emerging eating disordered eating.
Yeah.
Like, do you feel like you have, I'm curious what you're seeing in your practice. Are
Yeah,
you,
I feel lucky so far that the cases that I've seen or worked with where it does feel like this is maybe less about control and body image, and maybe there's some element of that, but more so there's a contributing mental health factor. I've been part of some really great collaborative and communicative care teams. And that's so important. I mean, whether I'm talking to the physical therapist and getting a sense of how did the athlete seem in your sessions today? And what are some of the things you guys are working on? And did they tell you that they're going to the gym 4 days a week or that they're like not taking any rest days, things like that? Or I will kind of get a sense of how things are going, but then chat with their mental health provider and be like, whoa, you're getting a totally different picture. So I think, having that collaborative care team is important in so many cases and for so many clients. It's not just important for a young athlete, of course, but because I'm often getting referrals from these other providers, that care team is kind of already formed and it feels good to be part of that. And so we can all share, with the right releases of information, of course, like you share kind of how things are going to be able to support each other in the work that we're all doing.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and going back to that again, early question, when your athletes are asking, can they continue working on this without stopping training?
Mm.
How are you addressing that? When do you feel like it's the time to pull the training, reduce the training? What's your
Yeah.
approach? What's your approach to all that?
Yeah, I mean, I will say with the high school athletes I've been working with, there's often a forcing agent that takes the training out of the pictures. It's like, well, we have a stress fracture, or we have two stress fractures, or we have two bone stress injuries. Like it can be severe, like, and it's scary in these young bodies that should really at this age be so resilient and so strong and building all of this bone mass and bone mineral density, and we're seeing the opposite. So I think oftentimes there has been a forcing agent of, kind of removing sport as, or removing the exercise output as part of the equation, at least for a little while. And then that gives me a really good on-ramp to like, okay, let's ease back into this when they are in the return to sport phase. For other athletes, I mean, again, like more really the bulk of my work over the last 10 years has been with more adult athletes, and it's having a lot of conversations around what are we getting versus what are we losing from continuing to do this? And how is it contributing to your overall well-being, and how is it detracting from your overall well-being? And again, the big fear for an adult athlete, somebody who's training recreationally and does this as part of their life and for fun, like it should be fun, is like it's just become very rigid and very controlled and very like it's taking away from your life. I'm seeing people who have to work out after work and forego social interaction because of that. And so we have a lot of conversations around, like how are we balancing things? What does that look like? And how would it feel to skip this day, take a rest day on Wednesdays and have dinner with a friend? Like trying to introduce ways that help people see how much they've put into sport and how it's taking away from other aspects of their life. So, in the absence of something like an injury that takes an athlete out of their sport entirely, and then we do have a little more room to work on nutrition and they have more energy to kind of put towards nutrition support. In the absence of that, it just requires a lot of checking in on like, how is this actually feeling for you? How does this actually add to your life? And is it fun, or has it become something you feel like you have to be doing? And there will always, in my experience, there is almost always that fear of like, what if I lose my fitness? I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, what if?
Yeah.
Let's explore that, Let's give that lots of space.
Mm-hmm.
What if you lose it? What are the pros and cons? And like, if we look down the line, what are we sacrificing for this current level of fitness that will be impermanent no matter what?
Mm-hmm.
It's not always going to be there, And I work with a lot of runners, so it's helpful for me to pull on the themes of a training cycle, where I say, like, in any given training cycle, what most people experience, or what a lot of people experience, will be that you reach a point, it's really hard at first. You just feel like, ah, if you're just starting to train, you're like, this is hard, and the workouts are hard, and the long runs are hard, and I'm tired. And then you like, if you're fueling adequately and taking care of your body, you get to a point where the fitness settles in and it feels really good. And you're like, oh, I'm just in a great rhythm and all the fitness is catching up to me and I feel great and blah, blah, blah. And then you taper and that feels really hard because you're worried about losing all the fitness. And then you do the race and hopefully it goes really well, right? But like those are lots of ups and downs just in that maybe like 8 to 16 week cycle. So I try to pull on those themes a lot when I'm working with clients because again, I'm working with a lot of runners, a lot of endurance athletes, and just reminding them like they're whatever process we're talking about, we have learned lessons on how to navigate it from our experiences in sport. So we can take a break and we can come back to it and you can rebuild with a healthy body,
Mm-hmm.
But If you decide not to take time off now, at some point your body will decide for you.
Yeah. I love the question of like, what if you do lose your fitness? Like you're sort of moving to, like you're not trying to avoid the thing that is the fear,
Yeah.
right? I mean, that's the
Yeah.
like what will actually happen to you, right? And I
Yeah.
think that's part
Yeah.
of that over controlled. Like I don't even want to. I will do all these things to manage and control, not getting to even like look in the face of something I'm scared of.
Right. Right.
And
And
then
it's
you're
instead of
directing.
saying,
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
yeah, it's like instead of saying like, oh, no, you won't lose all your fitness. Like, yeah, you might.
Right. You're not reassurance.
Okay.
I think of OCD and like the reassurance seeking aspect. Like you're not
Yeah.
contributing to reassurance seeking, like you're not reassuring them. And I think
Yeah.
that is so helpful. Like we
Yeah.
often think, again, that's probably another systemic problem is we often think we want to like that reassurance is what's most supportive to somebody. But oftentimes
Yeah.
with over control and anxiety, that could be the thing that's actually not serving someone well.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, like the high school athlete asking, like, if I take this time off or if I fuel in my body changes, like, what if I'm not as good at my sport? And what if I don't get to compete in college? Okay, what if?
Right.
Yeah, let's go through that.
Mm-hmm.
Because you could keep doing all of the things you're doing now and also not compete in college because your body is so broken
Right.
because it's so unhealthy at that point that you don't have the performance capacity to go to that level or you just keep doing what you're doing now and do well enough but don't get to that level. Like all of these
Right.
outcomes are possible.
Right. And then that's where it goes back to the collaborative team. Like that could be a place where somebody, it really benefits them to be working with a therapist on the
100%.
grief and the mental
Yeah.
health side of it and all of that, right? That the
Yeah.
mental, emotional side. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. What about, I know I could talk to you forever. Can you maybe before one last question, like I was just thinking, do you have like a client like experience that would be that you'd like to share of just something that was really meaningful to you with an athlete you've worked with or
Mm.
something that feels like it really scratches the itch of like why you went into this field and something that just felt so rewarding?
Yeah. Well, my favorite email to get is I got my period, or so and so got her period, or got their period. I'm like, yes. I assure you, the way that email finds me is celebrating on the other side of my screen, like throwing my arms in the air, like, woo, periods, yay. So that's always a delight. I've had clients email me sometimes months, sometimes years after the fact. I had my baby, I had this kid, I just want to thank you. Like, got my period back, was able to do this. What, and that can look so many different ways. I don't want that to be like positioning, contraception or conceiving as one certain way. Like sometimes there are still other interventions that need to happen, but if we've set you up for being in a place where you can navigate those body changes and those fitness changes and those mental changes and you feel ready for it because of some of the work we did, I'm celebrating that. I'm celebrating all of it. And I got an email recently from someone who we worked together for a few months and we're taking a little break as she kind of navigates other life things. And, there's lots of things that kind of impact how often someone is able to engage with nutrition and mental health and coaching and maybe all the other things they have going on. So taking a little break, but got an email that she's having social outings like 2 to 3 times a week and just wanted to like share that with me because this was somebody who was working out before work, was working out after work, and where could we possibly be fitting in a social life? Who has time for that? So the gap between those two things is huge. And I was like, yes, I'm so delighted to hear that you're hanging out with people. I love it,
Oh my gosh, I love that.
Yeah, just the
Yes.
flexibility, right? Like
Right.
to have big goals is having big athletic goals, whatever your sport, and having flexibility and enjoyment in your actual life. Those two things do not have to be mutually exclusive. And like to the points earlier of the way that kind of sports have evolved in this country and the way we specialize and professionalize them at such a young age, there are a lot of people internalizing a message that to be a quote unquote good athlete at any level, it requires sacrificing all the other things that might bring me joy. And it doesn't have to be that.
No. Oh, love all these. Yes, Heather. I love these nuggets.
Tell me all about your periods. I always
Woo!
want to hear about it.
I know. I am so into periods too. I gave my girls period parties. I did
I
the
love
whole thing. I
it.
mean, it
Oh,
just
I
is
wish.
like, yeah, very meaningful. Okay, so before we close, is there anything that you feel like is missing from our conversation that you would like to add in?
I mean, just I think on that note, I just wish that there was a lot more health education for young menstruating people around their periods. I wish that I had understood my period at a much younger age than I did. I feel like it wasn't until I was wanting to get pregnant that I fully understood my period. And I was like, wow, why did this take so long? And only being in this field do I understand. That is why I understand its connection to our bone health, our mental health, our heart health. It's like this is touching so many systems, and there is such a limited understanding of that for so many people. And I just wish that that weren't the case. I don't have a way to solve that problem, but I'll keep talking about it anyways.
Yes. And I think your enthusiasm, I'm hoping, is encouraging to listeners of just having your perspective and your excitement and perspective to inspire. I don't know. I feel excited about that. So thank you for your expertise, your wisdom, your passion. I love it. It's a total treat. And for listeners to learn more about Heather's practice or Lane 9, please visit the show notes. If you're interested in Opal and want to learn more, please visit us at opalfoodandbody.com. Thanks to David Bazzi for editing, Jack Straw Cultural Center for sound engineering, and Aaron Davidson for the Appetite's original music. See you next time.